Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel. Get the Twinkle Fruit ability in database gene system. Chapter 21. Domineering. Yu Feng's expression was strange, this kind of burning and diffusing from the inside of the local skin, and finally turned into pure black, revealing the power of metallic luster, which was indeed very similar to the domineering in One Piece. And still armed color domineering. Did I unknowingly awaken the armed color domineering? Muttering, Yu Feng couldn't help but look a little strange, because just when he thought that this was an armed color domineering, a circle of flame-like dark red-black energy burned on the pure black metal color. Faintly, the cry of a phoenix sounded from that energy. This made a word instantly sound in Yu Feng's mind. Black Phoenix. This is the power that belongs to the Dark Phoenix. His face couldn't help but show a hint of shock. And just then, meet. Seeing Yu Feng's look of a daze, Chu Yan was overjoyed, and immediately attacked again. Feeling the sound of the wind in his ears, Yu Feng's eyes looked squarely at the meat ball. Although I don't know what this is like the power of the Black Phoenix, and it seems to be the power of armed color domineering, but I think it should be a potential hidden in his body after absorbing the Black Phoenix personality before. The reason why he did not awaken in the first place may be because he has not trained himself enough, and the potential given to him by the power of the Dark Phoenix personality has not yet been developed. Under the eyes with meat ball battles, the atmosphere of life and death battles in the ring, are estimated to be the last straw to stimulate this potential. Let me try it first to see how powerful this force is, I secretly said in my heart. Right on the meat. The moment the ball rushed over, his foot instantly condensed photons, and the light speed kick came out. At the same time, the Black Phoenix energy that was like an armed color domineering suddenly rolled up, and at first glance it looked like the demonic wind foot of One Piece King Nakayama-ji, and it was kicked in the flesh with a sudden blow. The ball was round and full of fat. Sea meat. At this moment, the belly of the ball suddenly dented at a speed visible to the naked eye. Jerk his eyes. The next moment, rumble, like a cannonball fired, flesh. The whole person flew out in an instant and hit the iron cage grid again. But this time, the iron cage did not stop him. Instead, accompanied by a clicking roar that made people's eardrums shake, I saw that the iron cage twisted and deformed, and soon broke into a big hole. It's not over yet. Just when the iron cage broke a big hole, followed by another boom, the ceiling of the underground fighting arena actually shattered, and a big hole was also broken, and not long after, there was another boom. Bang, bang, bang. In the entire underground mutant fighting arena, there are a total of 5 floors of shopping malls. Each floor is accompanied by a burst of screams from women, and the floor and ceiling are cracked one after another to open shocking holes. Until the final meet. The ball hit 5 floors before it stopped, and finally the whole person fell into the half-cracked wall, and it was completely pounced on the street. The entire underground mutant fighting arena was dead silent. The strange-looking referee was opening his mouth wide at the moment, completely stunned, looking at the shocking human-shaped hole on his head, feeling like a dream. Is this still human? Phew. Yu Feng breathed a long sigh of relief. With this kick out, he felt that his energy and physical strength were being consumed sharply, and he knew in his heart that this power that was like a black phoenix and like an armed color domineering force, for him at present, he could not use more. But I have to say that this force is really powerful. Originally, Yu Feng was still a little troubled by his lack of strength as a child, but now, with this strange power, there is no need to worry. Since it is like the power of the Black Phoenix, and it is like the armed color domineering, then it is simply called this force, the Black Phoenix armed color domineering. Yu Feng knocked on the pure black on his feet, and it felt like metal, so he quickly decided on a name for this power in his heart. Originally, with his elemental ability, he could ignore physical attacks. But this energy type attack in the Marvel world, the magic attack is not blockable. However, at present, there is this Black Phoenix armed color domineering that can strengthen the defense ability, but it gives him another means of defense. Some special magic attacks may not be easy to say, but energy type attacks, this Black Phoenix armed color domineering should be able to resist. Of course, the premise is that he has to arm this Black Phoenix with the strength of color domineering and cultivate stronger. Tonight's harvest is good, and it's time to go back. Look around. At this moment, those spectators have recovered from the shock, and under the leadership of unknown people, they continue to shout the name of Flash, and their emotions are very high. Seeing this, Yufeng laughed lightly, followed the movement of his body, and disappeared into the ring. However, just as he was about to leave this underground mutant fighting arena, his eyes suddenly moved. That's right, he came with Alex, and it seemed that he hadn't seen Alex since just now. What is this guy doing here tonight? Thinking of this, Yufeng was a little curious in his heart, so he turned around and returned. Of course, he had already taken off the strange costume, otherwise when he went back, he would definitely be watched by a large crowd of people. Soon, Yufeng came to the underground mutant fighting arena again. But just when he just came in, suddenly there was a burst of screams in the crowd, and the next moment, a huge roar sounded, and in this roar, it was obvious that there was a crimson concentric circle thick laser energy suddenly rushed out, smashing the audience stage. The furious shockwave energy was too obvious, and Yufeng knew at a glance that it was definitely Alex's. Alex actually got into a fight with someone. Looking at the extremely shocking scorching marks that were blasted out on the audience stage, Yufeng's two delicate eyebrows raised slightly, looking in the direction of the shockwave. Alex's figure in a white suit could be seen. It's just that at this moment, Alex is a little embarrassed, his half-length hair looks a little scattered, the pink shirt in front of him has a big hole, and the red tie has long disappeared. At the same time, Alex is not alone. Behind him were 2 or 3 children, all of them with a look of horror. Seeing this, Yufeng immediately knew what Alex was doing in this underground mutant fighting arena. It turned out to be to save the mutant child who was captured by the gangster forces. But since it's to save the child, why did Alex make such a big move, and Professor X didn't come? After all, X teaches a mind control and makes everyone stand still, won't everything be solved? Quote. Yufeng had some doubts in his heart. And just when he was a little confused, he suddenly saw a dressing. The young lady-like woman ran extremely quickly towards the exit of the underground fighting arena. Behind her, several members of the Black Forces chased after her with guns, but before they took a few steps, the lights around them were dim. Duh, whoosh, a piercing electric crackle sounded, followed by the entire underground mutant fighting arena lights all extinguished. Huh, Yufeng frowned. Apart from Alex making trouble, there are actually others here. Although the lights are all out, but because of the meat. The big hole where the ball hit the ceiling, there were still some lights in the mall flowing down, making the entire underground fighting arena seem less dim. And Yufeng is extremely close to the woman, so for a while you can see the appearance of the woman clearly, including the jump of the pair in front of the other party when running, and the scenery under the skirt. I have to say, it is really feeling a woman, ahem. No, what I should be thinking about now is not this, but, who is this woman? Just as Yufeng glanced over, the woman also noticed Yufeng, and immediately frowned, and her body paused slightly. How do you still have a child? The woman seemed to mutter. The next moment he bent down sharply, and in an instant the pair in front of him was full of almost breathing. Yufeng couldn't help but be a little stunned, and immediately after him, he felt his body floating, and he was actually directly hugged by the woman with one hand. Little brother, go with my sister. Quote. The woman whispered softly in Yufeng's ear, and then her body made several sensitive leaps, and quickly left the underground mutant fighting arena. Yufeng blinked, a little confused. What's the situation? Moreover, how do you always feel that a lump of things is against his head? Hey, the feeling of bouncing around is not very comfortable, okay. At this moment, the underground mutant fighting arena, which had been full of exclamations, fell silent. Through the faint light, you can see some spectators who are about to escape from the fighting arena, or have not had time to escape, fall, and cry, and suddenly, one by one, they all froze, maintaining their original posture and standing still. The members of the Black Forces who surrounded Alex were also all still, motionless. Seeing this, Alex couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. But at the same time, a hint of embarrassment appeared on his face, and when he turned to look over, he saw 2 figures slowly emerging from the darkness. One in a wheelchair was Professor X. And behind Professor X, it was Hank. Hank glanced at Alex, shook his head a little helplessly, and then hurried to the 2 or 3 frightened mutant children, and said softly to one of the Asian girls. All right, kids, you're safe. Little girl, what's your name, do you have a family? Quote. My name is Li Qianwan. My family passed away when I was very young. While Hank comforted the children, Professor X gestured to Alex, looking obviously not very good looking. Alex scratched his head, knowing that everything was his fault, pushed Professor X to the side, and then bowed his head. Professor, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. What's wrong with you, Alex? You just smashed this underground field, aroused the vigilance of mutant hunters in those unknown mysterious forces, and thus deprived us of the opportunity to save more people. Professor X said angrily. Alex looked ashamed, opened his mouth, did not argue anything. Well, I already know everything from your head, and you also want to save a child who is fighting in the ring out of good intentions, but you didn't expect that the child was a powerful character, which caused you to be discovered in advance. Professor X said, but did not blame Alex too much, but his eyes flashed. It's just a little strange, I haven't sensed the trace of the child called Flash, from just now to now, and just now it seems that someone is helping you, and that person has also lost his track, as if he knew that I would come. Quote, Professor, I've heard something about a mysterious woman lately, could it be she? Quote, Hank said at this time. Professor X and Alex were silent when they heard this, they knew who Hank was referring to. Alas, if she doesn't want to come back, none of us can force her. Professor X sighed slightly. Okay, I'll delete these people's memories, no one will remember what happened tonight. Hank, Alex, take the children back to school first. Quote, Yes, Professor. Hey, enough is enough. Quote, I have to say that the two balls with the head, bullets. This was really amazing, and between the woman's runs, Yu Feng felt as if he was floating in the clouds, and from time to time his little face was squeezed. Press. Between those two groups, Yu Feng, a guy with an adult soul, couldn't help but blush. But I really can't bear it, soft is soft, but the feeling of suffocation is still uncomfortable. Yu Feng rolled his eyes, and simply used the elemental ability to break free. Ha! The woman chuckled, looked into the empty arms, and then looked at the black-haired Asian boy who was already standing in the clearing, looking at the appearance of the other party rubbing his little head, and his eyes couldn't help but flash strangely. You, she said, you're the Flash. Quote, Yu Feng did not expect that this woman's thinking was so sharp, and he immediately guessed his identity. But he doesn't care. At the same time, too lazy to answer. It's better to go back to school at the moment. After all, after casting the Black Phoenix armed color domineering once, he has consumed a lot of physical energy and feels a little sleepy. Thinking about it, Yu Feng turned around and prepared to go back. Hey little brother, wait. Quote, seeing that Yu Feng was leaving, the woman immediately shouted, don't be wary of me, in fact, we are the same kind of people, you see. Quote, when Yu Feng heard this, his steps stopped, and he turned his head. The same kind of people. This woman is also a mutant. When he turned his head and saw the woman's appearance again, Yu Feng's heart was clear, because the woman had changed into another look. He looks all blue, his skin is like scales, and his hair is a fiery red. This woman, it's actually a witch. Witch, Yu Feng was subconsciously surprised. Younger brother, you know me. Quote, when the witch heard this, she immediately smiled, came to Yu Feng, and blinked her eyes, that's just right. That way, there's no need for you to be wary of me, right? Quote, opening his mouth, Yu Feng didn't know what to say. To be honest, for the witch, the famous mutant in the original work, he was not curious and it was definitely fake. However, don't witches usually look very cold? Why does it seem a little different now? Looking at the face of the witch who was close to her, her amber-like transparent eyes, and the undisguised interest in the other party's eyes, Yu Feng was slightly embarrassed for a while. He always felt that he was, as if, being targeted. However, at this moment, the witch's face froze, and her figure once again turned into the original noble lady form. She looked at the entrance of the underground fighting arena with a sense of vigilance, and the next moment she couldn't help but say that she picked up Yu Feng and walked quickly. Little brother, let's hurry up. Quote, I wipe, here again. Yu Feng was speechless, but fortunately, this time the witch held him with both hands. The position, it is also suitable and quite comfortable. Seeing this, Yu Feng coughed dryly in his heart, but he didn't break free. But who is the witch running away from like this? Turning his head to look at the entrance of the underground fighting arena, he saw that under the neon lights of the mall, several figures appeared, the first of which was a wheelchair. So, is the witch hiding from Professor X? Yu Feng thought thoughtfully. He knew that originally the witch and Professor X had grown up together since childhood, and they were very good brothers and sisters. However, after the first battle, after the confrontation with the Hellfire Club, the two parted ways because of their different concepts. Until the Washington events reunited 2 years ago. It's just that after that incident, the witch still did not return, but still acted as her own Lone Ranger, using her own way to help rescue mutants trapped in danger. Wait, Professor X really came to this underground mutant fighting arena. Quote. Yu Feng suddenly realized something. Then Alex just looked like he was wreaking havoc. It seems that he was impulsive again, right? Gee, Alex is probably going to be severely criticized by Professor X. Yu Feng couldn't help but feel a little amused in his heart. Alex usually looks like a schoolboy, calm appearance, but in fact he is a guy who can't hold his breath and is more impulsive. Of course, Yu Feng's focus was not here. But since Professor X is here, he should also know about the Flash in the ring, once or twice. If Professor X knows too many scenes about the Flash battle, then with Professor X's cleverness, he will definitely guess that it is him. After all, Yu will train in the base in the academy in the future, and he will definitely have to show his ability, but he can't hide it. At the same time, it is unlikely that he will only go out for practical training once. Just once, it's too much. At this stage, don't let the professor know about my going out for practical training. After all, the professor is too important to children, especially 7 or 8-year-old children. Professor X cares too much about the safety of the mutant children. If Professor X knew by now that the Flash was him, although it would not limit him, there would always be some trouble. A bitter preaching is certainly indispensable. Yu Feng can't stand this the most. It's really not good. In the future, I won't go to the surrounding fighting arena, run farther, or even go abroad, go to other countries, and find some high-quality mutants for actual combat. After all, the mutants in the ring battle, the quality is too uneven, the actual combat significance will be less and less. It is better to find some strong people alone, and it does not necessarily have to be in the ring. Oh, but I don't seem to know the road very well, and I don't know what are the strong people, specifically there. Just thinking about it, at this time the witch finally stopped and put Yu Feng down. However, when he put it down, he seemed to be filled with bad taste, and actually pinched Yu Feng's slightly red face. Little brother, what are you thinking so out of your mind? Quote, being pinched so lightly, although there was no pain, but suddenly had the feeling of being tuned by the big sister. The strange feeling of the play, hey, I'm tuned. Drama. Yu Feng looked at the witch speechlessly, and said with a dissatisfied look. Hey, I'm a man, don't move your hands and feet. Poof. When the witch heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. It's still a little man. Looking at Yu Feng's dissatisfied look of rolling her eyes wildly, the witch finally converged. Good. You're a man, right? Yes, little brother. Brother, are you interested in following your sister in the future? Quote. When Yu Feng heard this, he looked at the witch with wide eyes, and his small face froze. This witch has been a little brother since just now. Little brother. The younger brother called him, looking inexplicably very interested in him, and now he still said such a sentence. Could it be that this witch is a distraction? No, the only thing on my mind is learning. Yu Feng immediately refused. It's very righteous. How nice it is to be in mutant school, with Hank teaching him science, little Lolican going in and out with him, and Professor X's guardianship. He doesn't want to run around with the witch all the time. Of course, the witch girl is estimated to have always gone to those underground mutant fighting arenas to rescue some captured mutants, and having such an old driver to guide the way also saves Yu Feng some trouble. However, recently, Yu Kaide does not want to go to the ring for the time being. Stop and ask where there are powerful mutants. After all, most of the mutants in the ring are not very strong, and the actual combat significance will become smaller and smaller. It is better to find those powerful existences. The goal is determined, and then go to the actual battle. No matter where the opponent is, whether in the ring or elsewhere, only by finding a high-quality opponent can he truly promote the development of his actual combat potential. Seeing Yu Feng's appearance of immediate refusal, the witch was suddenly a little disappointed, but still insisted. Little brother, really don't you want to be with your sister? Oh yes, looking at your young age, you seem to like to fight with others. If you follow your sister, you will often have the opportunity to beat others. Quote. The witch said, blinking her eyes. Yu Feng still looked like he couldn't enter the oil, rolled his eyes and shook his head, and directly raised his steps to leave. If you don't have anything else, then I'll go first. Oh, wait, younger brother, you haven't told me your name yet. Quote. Seeing this, the witch suddenly felt a little helpless, but suddenly her spirit flashed, and she said with a smile, my name is Ruiwen. If you change your mind and want to find me, go to this address to find a person named Caliban and he will tell you where I am. Quote. Saying that, he stuffed a note into Yu Feng's hand, and pinched Yu Feng's little face with a very fond look. Okay, finally, tell me your name, little brother. Junior. Quote. Hey, don't do anything to me, I'm a man. Quote. Yu Feng was slightly sore. Get, this witch really looks at his cute and handsome Xiaozhengtai appearance, and it is really not good that the person is too handsome and cute. But Caliban, hearing this name, Yu Feng's eyes couldn't help but flash, and his eyes turned slightly. Ha ha, good. My little man, I don't do anything to you. The witch laughed. Just call me Flash, let's go. Yu Feng was afraid that this suspected demon woman who was controlled by his brother would touch this and that to him again, so he simply dropped a sentence, and the next moment immediately fled away at the speed of light. The witch saw Yu Feng turn into a light and disappear, and she couldn't help but be slightly stunned. But soon the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up, and he burst out laughing. This little brother, you Ruiwen's sister are so terrible. Quote. Flash, sure enough, as the name suggests, there is a speed like light, if there is this Flash little brother. If my brother helps me, it is estimated that more mutants can be saved, right? Quote. The witch gradually converged her expression, as if she remembered something, and her eyes flickered a little. To be honest, since the Washington incident 2 years ago, although she has been working alone, doing her best to help mutants in need, and turning down many other people's invitations to cooperate, she does not like to go it alone. She was just used to going it alone. She just had a hard time trusting people anymore. But just now, she seemed to feel a different kind of ease from the little boy called Flash, although the child was cold, but indeed, gave her a relaxed and comfortable feeling. This feeling reminded her of the time when she was a child, when she grew up with Charles. The expression seemed a little lonely. For some reason, she suddenly turned around and returned to the fighting arena, just in time to see Professor X, Hank, and Alex putting the rescued children into the car one by one. She watched unconsciously in the dark for a long time, until the car disappeared at the end of the night, and suddenly she seemed to see the beginning of the First War. Yu Feng, who returned to school, took a shower and quickly fell asleep. Through the faint moonlight, he picked up the note given to him by the witch and looked at the location written on it in Berlin, the capital of Germany, and his eyes couldn't help but flash. Caliban. Things seem to be getting a little interesting. Caliban is a mutant who can track other mutants. With his words, Yu Feng may not have to worry about finding opponents to actually fight, and Caliban not only does intelligence information about mutants, but also does all other information and intelligence work. As long as there is money, all the information, Caliban can find it for you. Yu Feng, on the other hand, just wanted to know some information about the special mysterious substance. One night without a word. Soon in the early morning, Yu Feng got up early on time to go to the library for lightspeed reading memory training, and with his reading speed, the entire library was almost finished by him. But it's one thing to finish reading, it's another thing to understand, and it's another thing to form an eternal memory. Reading is a never-ending spiritual training. Yu Feng was becoming more and more able to appreciate the esoteric philosophical truth in reading, and at this moment he was taking out a thick philosophy book from the shelf, which he had read 3 days ago, but now he had forgotten that almost a third of it was left, and now it was time to re-exercise his spiritual power. But at this moment, a delicate figure appeared from the side of the bookshelf. Demacia. Chin made an exaggerated posture, as if Galen was holding a big sword and swooping out from the grass towards Yufeng with his teeth and claws. This scene, Yufeng couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. Forehead, what the heck? Ha ha ha. Seeing Yu's stunned look of being frightened by himself, Jean couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. You said that I just didn't look like that tank-type mutant who often appeared in the Summoner Canyon Holy War, Demacia Power Galen. Scared by me, right? Quote. Oh, yes, I'm scared. Yufeng couldn't help but twitch a little at the corner of his mouth. Twitching, decent and embarrassed laughter twice, feeling like my soul is popping out. He was frightened. It's not that the Demacia just now, but the piano actually imitated Galen. It seems that the poison of the Summoner Canyon is very deep. If Jean is allowed to go to the Earth with League of Legends, it will definitely be a deep internet addict girl. But even so, Yufeng was still happy to see Qin's cheerful appearance now. Oh yes, Jean, why did you come to the library so early today? Yufeng looked at Qin and asked. Jean is not him after all. He only needs to sleep for 2 or 3 hours to be energetic, and no matter how a student Qin is, he needs 7 or 8 hours of sleep for a normal child. Generally, Jean would come to the library an hour later than him. Today is actually an hour early. What should be the matter? I'm here to deliver a message on Professor Charles. Jean said, your ability to shield telepathics is too strong, and the professor can't find out where you are, so he can't send you a message, so he can only ask me to come to you. Quote. Oh, so, what is the professor going to say to me? Yufeng asked. The professor said, let the 2 of us go to the base to find Mr. Hank, and Mr. Hank prepared a research task for us. Kododo. That's right. Yu Kaide also thought that Hank would give them a research task later, but he didn't expect to introduce him and Jean yesterday and start the research mission today. What kind of task will it be? Yufeng was a little curious. Hank is proficient in almost all scientific fields, engineering, manufacturing, biological genetics, astronomy and geology, computational communications, and so on. Of course, the best thing is weapons engineering and manufacturing, as well as biological genetics. The so-called research mission, which Hank told him and Jean yesterday, is a research assistant, which is both a learning and a practical task. He and Jean learn what they should learn from it, and through practice, help Hank complete a scientific research or manufacturing project. Simply put, it belongs to the kind of hand over a tool or something. Hank will only briefly explain the principle and guide it. Others can only be self-taught through their own careful observation and practice. Most of it is also in the word, self-study. So being Hank's research assistant is very free, but at the same time, it is very difficult, because the research task given by Hank is really high-tech, and it is not easy to understand. Yufeng and Qin soon arrived at the base. The 2 have a special identity given by Hank, but they are unimpeded along the way, and soon arrive at their destination. It was an extremely spacious room, almost the size of a basketball hall, and Yufeng had been here yesterday, and it could be said that it was empty and there was nothing but big. But at this moment, there is one more behemoth. At first glance, it looks like a fighter jet, with a strange metallic black color throughout, and it is very powerful and handsome. Seeing this, Yufeng's eyes immediately lit up. Blackbird fighter. Not bad. This is exactly the Blackbird fighter. Equivalent to the Quinn fighter for S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers, the Blackbird fighter is the symbol of the X-Men. But soon Yufeng saw the problem. This Blackbird fighter looks very handsome, but right now, looks like an empty shell. Just a huge model that looks good. It is estimated that this Blackbird fighter, Hank has not had time to build it, right? Yufeng secretly said in his heart. After all, it has only been 2 years since the mutant school, and it is normal that Hank has not built this Blackbird fighter. Just thinking, boom. Suddenly, the surrounding lights dimmed down, and at the same time, several lights gathered around Yufeng and Qin. Seeing this, Yufeng's gaze moved slightly. Jean's little face showed surprise, and she involuntarily pulled Yu's arm. A figure gradually elongated, walked in front of the 2, it was Hank, and saw that Hank was still the same well-dressed old look, but unlike before, at this moment, his face showed an unusual mysterious color. He smiled slightly. Very well, Jean, I'm glad you can come here so early. I think you must be curious about my first research assignment next, Mr. Hank, your first research task is to let us choose the research field we are interested in first. Before Hank finished speaking, suddenly Jean said coldly. Hank was stunned, immediately came to his senses, touched his head, looked at the chin, and touched his head again, and his expression was immediately embarrassed. Well, Jean, I was defeated by you. I originally prepared a simple electromagnetic pulse helmet that temporarily isolated your telepathy, but I actually forgot to wear it, and the mystery that was brewing just now is all gone. Hank said helplessly. Quote. Yu Feng couldn't help but be speechless as he watched from the side. Knowing that there is Jean, he is still mysterious, and the key is that he forgot to wear a helmet that shields telepathy, and he also served Hank. Ahem. Hank coughed, slightly embarrassed. Okay, just now I just mediated the atmosphere, and now is the moment to officially enter the research task assignment. Quote. Saying that, he also glanced at the piano. Jean, don't let it into my head next. Okay, Mr. Hank, don't worry, I won't enter your brain again. Jean immediately spat out his little tongue. Head, a delicate and cute look, said that he would not do that again. Yu Feng couldn't help but laugh when he saw it. However, judging from Chin's words just now, Hank's first research mission is actually to let them choose the different fields they want to study. This made Yu Feng couldn't help but think deeply. He wasn't thinking about which field of science he wanted to study, but he wanted to study everything. At the very least, he can't study only one, otherwise it will be a waste of his talent. If Hank knew what Yu was thinking at the moment, he would definitely be speechless, and now he was sure that Jean would not break the news to him in advance, and his heart suddenly relaxed slightly, followed by a pause, and said. Jean is right, I really want you to choose the field you want to study. After all, you are still young, and when my research assistant is secondary, the main thing is to do a lot of study, otherwise, I'm not very comfortable really letting you practice various research projects, especially the weapons I designed, you know. Quote. Yu Feng and Chin both nodded. Of course I understand this. It would be strange if Hank really let them experiment with various research projects in the first place. Well, since you all understand, let me tell you about what I'm working on design right now, and you too can determine what research you're ultimately interested in based on the various things I'm studying. Hank said, and at some point, a remote-like thing appeared in his hand. One push of the button. Wow, the lights changed immediately. All the lights were focused on the unfinished Blackbird fighter. Jean looked at the Blackbird fighter with wide eyes and amazement. Yu Feng's face was calm. Wow, Mr. Hank, this plane is so handsome. Jean couldn't help but marvel. When Hank heard this compliment, his heart was naturally happy, and he immediately explained with great interest. The aircraft, codenamed Blackbird, has supersonic speeds, explosion-proof devices, and stealth. This room was actually originally a bomb shelter, and above, it was on the school's basketball. I designed the basketball court to have a movable roof so that the Blackbird could fly out. Quote. It's amazing. Jean's big eyes were shining, obviously interested in this Blackbird fighter, but soon his little eyebrows wrinkled, and he looked at Hank and said, by the way, Mr. Hank, why are you building a fighter like this? Quote. When Hank heard this, he habitually lowered his head and touched his forehead, as if he was remembering something. Then he smiled slightly, looked at Jean and said, it's actually very simple. After the Washington incident 2 years ago, I always felt that we should restart the X-Men program. The so-called X-Men is to gather some mutants with warrior potential in the school and train them to protect the school, protect mutants, and even protect humans from some evil forces. Quote. Of course, the professor actually wants students, not fighters. Hank suddenly shrugged again. Professor, he still has hope for humanity, hope that humans can live in peace with mutants. If we have a group of warriors, perhaps, humans will be more wary of us. Quote. Yu Kaide calmly listened to Hank's words. He understood Hank's philosophy. Professor X wants to make peace with humanity, but Hank wants to be at peace with humanity while preparing for the worst. The formation of the X-Men is said to be for world peace, but in fact, the main role is to protect mutant people, especially mutant children in schools. Children have always been forbidden by Professor X and a group of mutant teachers. Teacher Hank, don't worry, no matter what, whether there are X-Men or not, we will protect the school. Listening to Hank's words, Jean seemed to be ignited with fighting spirit, holding the little pink fist, because we are both the professor's student and the mutant warrior, we are going to fight for our glory. Man in the tower, Demacia. Quote. Quote, comma, comma, quote. Quote, comma, comma, quote. Both Kaide and Hank looked at Jean. Hank looked confused. Yu Feng looked pained. Forehead, violin, it seems that the poison in the Summoner Canyon is too deep. Ahem, that, Mr. Hank, Jean, this is listening to me tell too many Summoner Canyon stories. Demacia, you can understand it as long-live mutants, are proud of mutations. Quote. Seeing Hank's puzzled look and not knowing what Jean was talking about, Yu Feng immediately explained with some shame. Oh, that's so, Demacia, long-live mutants, mutated and proud, Hank abruptly, but what does it mean that people are in the tower? Quote. Yu Feng just wanted to answer concisely, but saw that at this time, Qin rushed to answer with a small excited look. Mr. Hank, being in the tower means resolutely guarding the homeland. Going deeper, it starts with Summoner Canyon. Legend has it that a long time ago, there was a canyon full of mysterious rune magical power, and a group of mutant heroes for their respective glory carried out a 5v5 holy war divided into blue and purple sides in that Summoner Canyon. As soon as the Summoner Canyon was mentioned, the whole piano seemed to have changed as a person, and he was very interested. Hank rarely saw that Jean was so cheerful and excited, and he couldn't help but glance at Yu Feng with some surprise. It seems to say, boy, you have a hand. Yu Feng couldn't help but be embarrassed. At the same time, Hank listened to the matter about the Summoner Canyon, and seemed to be very interested, so he and Jean immediately entered the heated discussion about the Summoner Canyon, the 5v5 holy war between the blue and purple sides. For a while, the painting style suddenly became strange. Yu Feng looked at this scene stunned, not knowing whether to cry or laugh. Sure enough, Summoner Canyon is poisonous, and it is still contagious. I already knew that he would not tell Jean the story of Summoner's Canyon. By the way, Mr. Hank, this fighter does not seem to have been built yet. A fighter includes engineering, manufacturing, electronic communications, computer information technology, weapon systems and other scientific research fields. Do you want me and Jean to understand the field of interest from this fighter? Seeing that Hank and Jean were hotly discussing the Summoner Canyon, and even wanted to pull him in together, Yu Feng suddenly felt a little helpless. Quickly began to change the topic. Oh, yes, you're right. Hank said, building a fighter aircraft can be said to be a huge and extremely complex project. You need to master the basic flight principles, flight mechanics, flight structure, and solid physics knowledge, structural mechanics, engine principles and structures, as well as various radio, navigation technology, and even you have to master mechanical design drawing, maintenance program design and so on. Quote. But in simple terms, it can be divided into design and manufacturing categories. Looking at the frowning look on Yu and Kodo's faces, Hank smiled and continued, I do want to stimulate your interest through the various manufacturing techniques of this Blackbird fighter, but I know that both of you are elementary school bullies, and it is estimated that just one small field will not be satisfied, so I integrated several different scientific fields and classified them into categories. Quote. The design and manufacturing category, I just mentioned as a large category after integration. So it is. Yu and Kotu all nodded their little heads. In fact, the so-called design and manufacturing cannot cover all the technologies contained in the entire fighter, but can only be regarded as gathering the technical essence contained in a fighter. Yu Kaide probably understood what Hank meant. Learning this, design and manufacturing, does not mean that you are really building an airplane, but it stimulates your talent in the field of design and manufacturing, which contains a lot of scientific knowledge, so as to become an inventor. Design and manufacturing represents invention, weapons, communications, vehicles, mechanical engineering technology, electronic engineering technology, and so on and so forth. Hank wanted to train an all-around inventor in engineering. So, Mr. Hank, what other categories are there? Jean asked. Yu Feng looked at Hank and couldn't help but be a little interested. He thought that Hank should start from the beginning, just teach them some very ordinary basic knowledge. Even if they determine their respective fields of interest, it is only equivalent to dividing into physics, chemistry, biology and so on. At the moment, it seems that this is not the case. Hank seems to have an ingenious alternative plan. He really thought about the future of Yu Feng and Qin. It can even be said that this all-round inventor path of design and manufacturing is very similar to a research path specially prepared for a boy like Yu Feng with a strong heart of inquiry and high perseverance. So, according to this number of paths, it is estimated that Hank should have prepared two major research categories, right? One is the all-round inventor in engineering, prepared for him. And the other, according to another area of science that Hank is best at, it should be about biological genetics, specifically for Jean. Sure enough, hearing Jean's question, Hank did not mean to be mysterious anymore, and said directly, another choice, Jean, is different from design and manufacturing, it is pure research. Study the genes of our mutants, even all of humanity, of all living things on the entire planet. Quote. Oh, research genes. Quote. Jean's little face seemed to bloom, and it was obvious that she was very interested in this. You can call this genetics. Come with me, Hank said as he got on the unfinished Blackbird fighter, but saw that although the Blackbird fighter was not finished, there was a hole in it, and it seemed to be a laboratory-like place. Hank pressed the button. Wow! The Blackbird fighter suddenly lit up with strange azure light, and as these lights lit up, pictures appeared on the walls, including X-ray maps showing the orientation of different human bones, electron microscope projections showing various cells, and even some bloody-looking human anatomy diagrams. Seeing those human anatomy drawings, Jean's little face was slightly tight, but strong curiosity obviously overshadowed the fear of these bloody pictures, and Jean looked over with wide eyes, her eyelids almost unblinking, and she couldn't help but mumble. These seem to have a lot of similarities with biomedicine, and these anatomical diagrams are so clear, much clearer than in the book, which startled me at first. Seeing this scene, Hank nodded and smiled slightly. The corners of Yu Feng's mouth were also upturned. It is clear that Jean's interest and talent are in this biology. In fact, Jean will be a biomedical doctor when he grows up, and he has a deep knowledge of biology. I have to say that Hank's vision of people is accurate. Yu Feng does have a strong interest in engineering manufacturing, and he was a master of invention and manufacturing before crossing over, especially after watching the Iron Man movie, he fantasized that he could have a set of steel armor. But at the moment, with light-speed memory learning, he will certainly not be satisfied with just research, invention and creation. This biological genetics is definitely to be mastered. What's more, in Yu Feng's opinion, studying biological genetics is more likely to come up with some mysterious substances, and he will definitely not miss it. Jean, this genetic class originally includes biomedicine. Not only that, but also biochemistry, microbiology, physiology, molecular biology and so on. Looks like Jean, you're very interested in this category. Quote. Hank smiled at Jean. Well, yes, Mr. Hank. Jean nodded her head seriously. I grew up and wanted to be a doctor. Quote. Well, Jean has already chosen the field of research that interests you. How about you? Do you want to study genetics, or design and manufacture? Hank looked at Yu Kaide to the side. Yu Feng looked at Hank, smiled slightly, and said without the slightest hesitation, I want to study both. Quote. Oh, yes. Quote. Hank was stunned when he heard this. Jean was also stunned for a moment when she heard this, but soon her eyes rolled on her little face, and she quickly said to Hank. Mr. Hank, I've changed my mind. I want to be the same as you, and I will learn whatever you learns. Quote. At this moment, this ellipsis is enough to describe Hank's mood, especially when he heard Jean's words, I will learn whatever you learns, he suddenly cried and laughed. Hey, can girls be more reserved? Such a feather-like little heel, I can't stand it. Yu Feng's expression was calm. When Jean said this, he was not surprised at all, not only because Qin liked him, but also because Qin was also a scholar, and he had more or less the meaning of competing with him in his heart. It's natural for girls to compete with boys. Yu Feng's main worry was Hank's thoughts. After all, from just now, Hank's mind is already obvious, he wants you to specialize in design and manufacturing, and let Jean study genetics. These two research categories already contain many scientific fields, and it is not easy to learn or even master it. Even after 10 years, it may not be able to study to the point of profundity. But Hank never thought that this child, was actually not satisfied. As for Jean's words, completely feathers little ass, Hank can choose to ignore what Jean just said. Are you sure you want to learn both? Hank didn't immediately refuse. He remembered the excitement in Ha's eyes when Professor X asked Ha to graduate early and become his research assistant. Moreover, Yu went to the library every day to read books with an extremely exaggerated speed. This kind of thing is too obvious, he naturally knows, and also understands that Yu has a mutant ability of rapid memory learning. However, the complex content contained in the two seemingly simple research projects of design and manufacturing and genetic inheritance can not only be mastered by rapid memory learning. Because these two kinds of research not only rely on solid and rich knowledge of biology, physics, chemistry, mathematics, mechanics, medicine, engineering, etc., but also experiments. Lots of experiments. Sensei Hank, didn't you say that we have to choose what is our freedom? Yu Feng smiled slightly, looking extremely confident. I think choosing just one is a waste of me and Qin's talent. It's better to let us both choose, maybe me and Qin can give you a surprise. Quote. Yes, Mr. Hank, don't underestimate the two of us. Qin also said, and even took out the elements in the Summoner Canyon as a metaphor. You and I are the golden partners of the next road, as you said, just choosing one is a waste of our talent. Quote. Looking at these two children, you said everything you said, and what they said was still presentable. Hank opened his mouth and couldn't help but be a little speechless. You two bear children, who have not yet grown up, actually sing and reconcile like a small couple, which is enough. Finally smiled helplessly, well, defeated by the two of you. But I can say it here, if you two feel bitter and tired by then, you can't be allowed to regret it. After all, studying two major categories at the same time will cost you more than twice as much time. Quote. Don't worry, Mr. Hank, we won't regret it. Of course, Yu Feng would not regret it. Of course, Hank is right, and it takes more than twice as long to study the two major categories of design, manufacturing and genetics at the same time. But it's worth it. After all, Hank is not like those teachers who specialize in teaching boring lessons. Hank is a real top scientist, one of the smartest people on the planet. With his personal teaching, what you learn is something really useful, and spending more time is completely worth it. Now that the next research project was decided, Hank didn't have much nonsense, and directly explained the relevant knowledge of genetics to Hawakoto, as well as the pictures on the wall. I've told you about the basics you need to study genetics, the books you're going to read. Hank is now fully in the state of being a teacher. Yu Feng and Qin listened carefully with small faces. The teaching of a day is fixed for 1 hour. The rest of the time is allocated by Hawa and Kodo. Want to play? Okay. Want to learn? Okay. Anyway, except for this hour, Hank will be busy with his own affairs on weekdays, transforming the base, optimizing various facilities, and building fighter jets, etc., and he can't control them. With the minds and learning speed of the two of you, even compared with some college graduate students, I am completely at ease with you. Hank is well aware of Yucade and Jean's ability to learn. Put in those schools outside, basically two proper prodigies. But self-learning about some basics, on Hank's side, is obviously not the point. He paused slightly, then his expression became slightly serious. Next, I want to tell you about the genetic aspect, which is a very important point, especially the research on the genes of our mutants. Hank said, and ran to an isolated control room inside the fighter. I don't know what I did, but suddenly the azure light in the entire fighter changed and turned into darkness. But soon the light came on. Yu Feng and Qin opened their eyes wide, and when they looked over, they saw that there seemed to be a curtain where the light lit up, and on the curtain, fragmentary and slightly old pictures were projected. In the picture is a person. Unseemly people who are dissected, or rather, it's mutants. There are even text files next to each one. File number. No 609463. Name. Salvador. Codename. Angel. Date of death. August 5, 1972. File number. No 126663. Name. Azazel. Codename. Red Devil. Date of death. The 11th of July 1969. File number. No 703422. Name. Sean Cassidy. Codename. Kraken. Date of death. February 9, 1970. The picture is a black and white photo. You can't see any bloody color, some are even more blurry, but it gives people the feeling that there is a kind of cold that penetrates the marrow, especially Jean. There seem to be tears flashing in the wide eyes. This How cruel, she murmured. Yu Feng's expression was calm, but his eyes also showed heaviness. Some of the mutants in the photo he still knew. There are a few mutants who simply appeared in the first battle, the most obvious being the Red Devil. Without looking at the text file, Yu Feng can see it at a glance. After all, the image of the Red Devil is too classic. There is also the Angel Salvador, who was originally a dancer herself, recruited by Professor X and Magneto, and later defected to the Hellfire Club. This woman has a pair of insect bionic-like wings, and can spit out flames and venom in her mouth to attack. However, at this moment, the woman's wings have been taken off. The whole person's head is still intact, and the front part of the body has been completely dissected, revealing the internal organs inside. It's tragic. There is also that Kraken Sean KDC, who has been following Professor X, the mutant who can spit special sound waves, and now his whole body is dissected, and even dismembered, legs, hands, body, torso, face, skull. Bloody, cruel, inhumane. This is the status and situation of mutant people in previous years. Although Yu Feng is not a pure mutant, in the eyes of ordinary humans, it is estimated that as long as they have special abilities, they are all aliens, and he is no exception, and this scene at the moment, saying that there is no slightest fluctuation in the heart, is absolutely false. These should be the original experimental data materials of Bolivar Trist, right? It seems that after the Washington incident, Professor X and Hank managed to get everything from Trist's industry to the school. Yu Feng secretly said in his heart. In fact, it is normal, although Bolivar has fallen, it would be bad if what he studied fell into the hands of other people with ulterior motives. Just in case, Professor X and Hank certainly have to take these things into their own hands. Hank's expression was a little gloomy. After all, the mutants who had died by experimental research, some of whom had been his friends, he paused, seemed to adjust his mood, and followed. This is what humans look like when they conduct experimental research on our mutants, and they are eager to master the genes of mutants and turn them into weapons. And that's the point I want to tell you too. Hank said in a solemn voice, the study of genetics is not to make biological weapons, let alone to destroy anyone, but to make the world a better place, to solve diseases, to protect life, understand? Quote. Saying that, as soon as Hank pressed the button, the picture turned, turning into a scene where Bolivar was arrested. Coupled with some pictures and reports of mutants and ordinary humans living peacefully in today's time, it is like an ideological education classroom through negative teaching materials and the final positive energy picture. When Chin heard this, goodbye to this, he immediately nodded his head vigorously. Mr. Hank, I understand. The corners of Yu Feng's mouth twitched slightly. Forehead, well, he knew that this was actually an ideological education lesson. Yu Feng, who is simply an adult in his mind and soul, will certainly not be educated by Hank. In a few words, for him, the study of biological genetics is just to discover more mysterious substances through one more channel. I don't know if those gene potions, serums, etc. that can give people special abilities can be considered mysterious substances. Just thinking about it, at this moment, Hank closed the curtain, turned on the headlights, and the entire interior of the Blackbird fighter returned to brightness. At the same time, Hank took Yu Feng and Jean to the control room of the fighter in front. At the moment, this control room is not really a control room. It looks more like an experimental storage room, and it is also storing the more precious experimental products. The most eye-catching thing in front of me is a glass counter-like thing, which shows a strange blue color under the light, and you can faintly see that there is a cold air flow in the glass. Seeing this, Yu Feng couldn't help but feel a little surprised in his heart. It seems that Hank was not busy with other things when he made the Blackbird fighter, so there should be some special genetic potion serum in the glass counter, right? It was indeed as Yu Feng thought. Hank quickly introduced with a smile. Jean, let me introduce you to some of the results I have obtained in my years of studying biology and genetics. In fact, strictly speaking, it is not a profound thing, just some souvenirs, which are basically useless now. Quote. Some of them were used for special purposes. Like this. Hank pointed to a dull yellow test tube. When the professor was paralyzed by a bullet in the spine, he was in pain, so I developed such a serum that can make the professor stand up, but the price is, professors, that he can't use his abilities anymore. Quote. This thing can inhibit the professor's ability, that is, it can inhibit telepathy. Jean stared at Hank with wide eyes. Yes, good. Hank was stunned for a moment and nodded, but soon smiled a little reactionally. Jean, I know what you're thinking, but you shouldn't need it now, right? Quote. Saying that, he also glanced at Yu Feng. Ahem, Mr. Hank, what do you say? When Qin heard this, her little face immediately turned slightly red. Yu Feng's face was expressionless, rolling his eyes wildly. Feed, Hank, you're enough. And this, Hank continued, this is a very special serum, and I originally developed it to suppress changes in our body to the mutant genes in our body, but it will not affect our superpowers. While speaking, he also opened the glass and took the serum out of the refrigeration. I saw that it was a strange serum packed in a syringe with a transparent blue color. Jean's little face looked over curiously. However, Yu Feng's eyes suddenly flashed at this moment, because at this moment, the long-lost voice of the Flash suddenly sounded in his mind. Sensing the appearance of a mysterious substance. Mysterious substance? Yu Feng was slightly stunned. It was obvious that the mysterious substance that Flash was talking about was the serum in Hank's hand. However, wasn't it just 300 meters away from being reminded last time? Why didn't you remind you until Hank took out the serum? Flash quickly explained. The special power contained in this mysterious substance is relatively weak, and it is in refrigeration, and its activity is suppressed, so it is difficult to perceive it at first. So it is, Yu Feng said in his heart. That means that as long as the activity of the mysterious substance is strong enough, the distance that can be sensed will become larger and larger. Quote. Good. Hearing this, Yu Feng couldn't help but think thoughtfully. As he thought before, things like genetic potions and serum can also become mysterious substances. However, mysterious substances like this are not strong enough, and the special energy contained in them is relatively low. Therefore, it may not help much to improve his ability. Of course, if that is the case, Yu Feng will not pick and choose at the moment. The other serum developed by Hank did not react, but this seemed to be unpretentious. The amount was very small, and only the serum of the half-cut syringe tube had the potential of a mysterious substance. It can be seen that in the large category of gene agents and serum, there should be few, or even very few, that can become mysterious substances. Right now, he ran into one, obviously very lucky. By the way, Hank said that the effect of this serum is to inhibit the effect of mutant genes on changes in appearance. Isn't this serum the one that Hank made with the blood of the witch in the first battle? Quote. In the first battle, both the witch and Hank were extremely concerned about their appearance at first. The witch didn't want to turn into that weird blue look, while Hank didn't like his huge, ugly, monster-like feet. So Hank wanted to use the mystery of deformation in the witch gene to develop a serum that specifically suppresses the influence of mutant genes on external appearance. But he never expected that this serum not only did not inhibit his mutant genes, but strengthened, making Hank himself become a blue monster. That is, today's beast. Hank prepared a total of 2 serums, one for himself and one for the witch. But the witch later refused under the influence of Magneto, no longer worried about her appearance, so the serum that Hank took out now should be the one that the witch rejected at the beginning. In other words, the reason why this serum can become a mysterious substance is because of the gene of the witch. Yu Feng's eyes flashed slightly. Hank continued. This serum, I first called it antidote, but unfortunately, it did not really suppress the mutant gene, but enhanced it. Quote. Saying that, he couldn't help but shake his head. Mr. Hank, can you show me this serum? At this moment, Yu Feng suddenly said, with a very curious look on his face. Of course. Hank smiled slightly and handed the serum over. Yu Kaide catched. The moment he held it in his hand, he only felt that the tentacles were cold, and when he was about to ask how Flash should absorb this serum that was a mysterious substance, he suddenly noticed that the surrounding area was gray, and he had actually automatically entered his database genetic interdimensional space. At the same time, Flash appeared in front of him in the form of Qin, grabbing the syringe containing serum in Yu Feng's hand. Boom! Countless golden rays lit up around them, and in an instant, Yu Feng saw that the serum actually disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye, completely dissolving in the golden flash. This consciousness quickly returned to reality. Yu Feng quickly looked at the serum syringe in his hand, and seeing that the serum in it was still there, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned in his heart. Still there, shouldn't this serum have disappeared just now? Data-based genes will only absorb the special energy contained in mysterious substances, and will not directly absorb physical objects. Flash replied appropriately. So it is. Yu Feng was clear. Originally, he was still thinking about how to absorb this serum, but he didn't expect that his database genes could actually be directly absorbed through the air, but it saved him trouble. Since it has been absorbed, this serum is no longer of any use to Yu Feng, and it is estimated that its role as a serum is completely wasted. After casually observing, he saw that Qin also looked curious, so he handed it to Qin again. At the same time, Hank began to explain the general research process of this antidote serum, so that Yu Feng and Jean had a preliminary understanding of the steps of a genetic experiment research. After explaining some generalities and points about genetics, Hank took the Blackbird fighter to explain the design and manufacturing. An hour passed imperceptibly. Soon the teaching ended. Hank began to go about his own business, and the rest of the time was freely divided by Yu Feng and Jean themselves. Qin Ke did not have the ability to memorize and learn at the speed of light like Yu Feng, so he needed a lot of time to learn some basic knowledge points, so he pulled Yu Feng to the library. Yu Feng was casual. His main mind now is still to experience which point of his body has become stronger, but after experiencing it for a long time, he feels that the photons turned into his body have become more active. Other than that, nothing else was discovered. That antidote serum probably should have enhanced the power of my photon attack, right? Just thinking about it, Qin had naturally held Yu Feng's hand. It's just that at this moment, the moment Qin held Yu Feng's hand, wow! A burst of golden dazzle shone. The next moment, in Yu Feng's stunned eyes, he saw that Qin's whole person was actually elementalized and turned into a photon form. Chapter 31. This sudden scene made Yu Feng stunned. Qin Xiao's face froze, and after noticing the changes in his whole body, he was also stunned. What happened to me? Quote. Qin blinked and looked at Yu Feng very suspiciously. Yu Feng felt a little painful. This scene even felt a little strange to himself, and naturally he couldn't say anything at the moment. However, don't say that with the light particles of the piano body, he actually has a strange feeling of integration with the piano. Well, the word integration seems a bit strange, but it is. At the same time, the activity of light particles on and off the whole body suddenly increased sharply. He had no doubt that if he came with a laser light at this moment, he could definitely explode the entire base at once, like Alex in the original movie, causing the entire mutant school to explode. Could it be that this is the change in my ability after absorbing that antidote serum? I couldn't help but secretly say in my heart. According to Flash, the evolution of his Shining Fruit's ability will evolve according to his heart's desire, which is slightly similar to the Hongyu in the Grim Reaper. Yu Feng, on the other hand, had a desire to make himself stronger by using the power of photons. Right now, photon enhancement is obvious. However, what the hell is it to also photon elementalize the piano? Although he felt very puzzled about this, fortunately, this photon assimilation ability that made people scratch their heads could be controlled by Yu Feng. He tried to converge the energy of the scattered light particles. As a result, the flash on the piano's body gradually dissipated until it disappeared completely, and the piano returned to normal. What's going on? Qin looked at Yu Feng very puzzled. She knew Yu Feng's ability, but this strange ability that could turn her into light had never been done before. She was worried about whether there had been any uncontrollable changes in Yu's ability. After all, she had felt this deeply. Don't worry, nothing happened, it's just that I just happened to control a special use of my ability. Yu Feng looked at Qin Dao. Oh yes, Qin, just now your body also turned into light particles. When you were elementalized, did you have any special feelings? Quote. Special feeling. Jean raised her little head and recalled. It seems that there is indeed a special feeling, as if it's the feeling of being one with you, the feeling of you entering my body. Quote. When Yu Feng heard this, black lines couldn't help but appear on his forehead. That feeling you get into my body, how can this sentence sound strange? Well, it was he who was evil. Qin Ke didn't understand the other meaning in those words. She blinked her eyes and glanced at Yu Feng simply, and continued to say with a serious look. And the special power in my body seems to be more active than usual. I was shocked, thinking my abilities were going to get out of control again. Quote. Oh, Is that so? Quote, Yu Feng's eyes flashed, thoughtful. The special power that Qin mentioned naturally refers to the power of the phoenix. When the photons were assimilated before, Yu Feng also felt that his photon energy became more active. Looking at this, his photon assimilation ability can not only assimilate the objects he touches into light particles, but also strengthen the abilities of both sides. For the time being, it seems that this is the role, but maybe there are other functions that have not been discovered. Yu Feng secretly said in his heart. Suddenly, an idea popped up in my mind. By the way, since I can photon the piano, why don't I take the piano to train with me in the future? With the piano here, I can keep trying, and develop other uses of the photon assimilation ability, and also help the Qin to better use my phoenix power. Although he was absorbed by Yu Feng, the Dark Phoenix personality has enabled Qin to now have some control over his abilities. However, even if you are no longer afraid of your own power, it is still impossible to control the power of the phoenix. The power of the phoenix that Qin controls right now is only a trace of the power of the phoenix she has. After all, Qin has the most perfect phoenix power ever. Although compared to the origin of the phoenix power possessed by Qin is not complete, but if you want to fully control it, it is not a matter of a moment, and you have to go through various tribulations, opportunities and training. Thinking of this, Yu Feng immediately conceived the next training and development plan. First, he wanted to try to see if he could converge that shining light when the photon was assimilated. After all, this light is too conspicuous and eye-catching. Fortunately in private, once in front of the public, almost everyone has to cast their eyes in unison. Qin was already very curious about Yu Feng's ability, and the form of photon assimilation just now also made her feel unfulfilled. At present, since Yu Feng proposed to experiment several times, he naturally readily agreed, and he simply did not plan to go to the library, so he accompanied Yu Feng to train in the base. Jean, let's experiment again. 10 minutes later. Yu Feng took Qin's little hand and took a deep breath. Calm down, come, follow me. Phew, suck it. Qin Xiao's face had a faint blush, and he took a long breath, trying his best to calm his mind. Feeling the calmness of the piano, Yu Feng nodded in satisfaction and began to run the photon energy to perform photon assimilation exercises. Of course, he can control the brightness of the light particles in his body, but in order to control it, he must first calm his emotions so that the light can converge. The focus is still on Jean's body. After 10 minutes of training, Qin has almost mastered the main points, and at this moment, with the photonization of the body, the head still has golden light shining at the beginning, but it quickly converges calmly. Very good. When he saw that the light on Qin's body converged, leaving only a faint golden fluorescence, he nodded in satisfaction. It worked. Jean was also happy. She tried to move her body, ready to walk and jump, carefully feel the difference between herself at this moment, but where did she think of just moving? Swish. The whole person moved at a straight distance and the speed of light, and before she could react, she and Yu Feng had already appeared in another room in the base. Huh. Seeing this, Yu Feng chuckled. It's not that I'm surprised that the piano can move at the speed of light. After all, he had already guessed this, since he could assimilate the piano photon. With him, the two would definitely be able to move at the speed of light together. It's the same as the Night Stalker taking someone to teleport. His main surprise was that just now, it seems that he and Jean went straight through the wall to another room in the base. Speaking of which, after the photon assimilation exercise just now, it seems that my control over the light particle energy of the shining fruit is higher. Piercing walls is not a very shocking ability. At high speeds, as long as the skill is achieved, it can penetrate the wall. Yu Feng couldn't do it before, just because his control over light particles was not very good, and he needed more training. But just now, when he was practicing photon assimilation with Qin, he faintly felt that the energy power of his light particles had not only become stronger, but also seemed that his control over photons had reached a new level. At this moment, seeing himself and Jean go through the wall to another room, a hint of surprise suddenly appeared on his face. Since my control over the energy of light particles has become higher, it means I've been able to use some of the shining fruit abilities of the pirate General Yellow Ape, right? Quote. Thinking about it, Yu Feng condensed his spirit and folded his hands. A stream of photon energy suddenly flickered. Jean looked over. I saw a golden light shining in Yu's palm, but it did not escape, but continued to condense and condense again. Countless photons are compressed and strengthened. Until the end, Yu Feng's eyes moved, and his hands were stretched out. Wow! Immediately, a slightly suffocating aura of energy spread, and the next moment, in Qin's slightly shocked expression, a golden lightsaber appeared in Yu Feng's hand. Wow! This! Jean couldn't help but cover the little mouth. Open your eyes to this incredible scene. Yu Feng's eyes were shining, and his eyes showed joy. Tiancong Cloud Sword. Really? With his current control over photons, he can already shape light particles and transform them into sword-like weapons. Try the 8 mirrors again. As soon as the palm moved, the Tiancong Cloud Sword suddenly dissipated, and at the same time, Yu Feng's hands made movements like luck, and as soon as he went up and down, a golden light condensed from the middle. At the moment of condensation, a light suddenly shot out from the palm of his hand. Go out, this is the 8 mirrors. Among the pirates, due to the linear propagation characteristics of light, the yellow ape can only rely on the refraction of the light emitted by the 8 mirrors to achieve the desired destination. Right now, Yu Feng's 8 mirrors have more than just such a use. At the moment when the light shot out, due to the refraction of the surrounding walls, it quickly deflected direction, but just as he continued to refract and deflect next, Yu Feng's mind suddenly moved. Wow, that light seemed to flicker, and then it actually penetrated the wall directly. Sure enough, I was able to control photons at will, either refractive or through walls, and Yu Feng's body moved, then disappeared in an instant. Then it appeared in place very quickly. The whole person looked as if he hadn't moved at all, but in fact, Yu Feng knew that his movement speed had broken through another level just now. How much specifically, without professional instruments, Yu Feng really doesn't know. However, he could feel that the speed of moving at the speed of light in a straight line using the 8 mirrors was several times faster than his usual. At this moment, if he encounters meat again, the ball, with his further speed and more powerful light particle energy, is estimated to be not only the extent that it can kick the opponent flying, but directly kick and explode. Without Yu Feng's palm contact, Qin had already withdrawn from the photon elemental state, but he could not perceive the change in Yu Feng just now, and he was still immersed in the Tiancong Cloud Sword that Yu Feng had just changed. Are you able to shape photons and change them into anything? Jean asked enthusiastically. Well, it should be, but to change into something other than a sword, it is estimated that you will need to practice more. Yu Feng nodded, suddenly sensing something strange on Qin's face. What's wrong? Jean, do you want me to conjure something special? Quote. Nope, Qin suddenly said with a slight dodge in his small eyes. I'm just wondering, when you tell me the story of Summoner Canyon in the future, can you use photons to shape a specific hero image, skill or something, so that it will have a more sense of picture? Quote. Quote. When Yu Feng heard this, his face was suddenly full of black lines. Feed. Jean, you're enough. Addicted to summoners like this again, believe me or not, huh. Wait a minute. Yu Feng suddenly had a flash of light. That's right. He has been thinking about how to develop his own special shining fruit ability, always following the old tricks of the yellow ape in the pirates. It must not work, he must develop some of his own shining fruit tricks, right? Previously, Yu Feng's control over light particles was not strong. But now, after absorbing the antidote serum, his control over light particles suddenly rose to a higher level, and he could develop more of the ability of light. He can use the skills of those heroes in the Summoner Canyon as a reference to develop some special, even extremely powerful moves. For example, a big move like Guangwei seems to be very good. For example, some of the Ghost Path moves in the Grim Reaper can also be referenced. There are other games he played in his past life, anime he watched, etc., and even some classic Ultraman tricks. Thinking of this, Yu Feng suddenly felt inspired. Gee, looking at this, when I train in the future, I have to add another training subject, that is, move development. Quote. He secretly said in his heart, but first I have to deepen my control over the light particles. Now there are no other mysterious substances, you can only rely on yourself to keep practicing to improve your control. By the way, why don't I really use light particles to derive various heroes, skills, and even the scene of the entire Summoner Canyon as Jean said, so as to practice? Quote. If you want to practice the control of light particles, constantly shaping and compressing light particles, changing into a variety of complex shapes, it is definitely a good practice. Although, it is indeed very difficult to conjure a summoner canyon with light particles, not to mention condensing heroes, minions, wild monsters, and skills. Simply impossible. But how do you know if you can't do it without trying? Thinking of this, Yu Feng's eyes suddenly brightened. He looked at Qin, and said with a slight smile. Good, Jean, I promise you. Quote, Qin was stunned when she heard this. But soon he was pleasantly surprised. Really? Of course it's true. Yu Feng smiled and nodded. And he also thought about how to train with Jean to deepen his control. Not bad, train with Jean. When assimilating the Qin photon and also becoming an elemental state, Yu Feng could clearly feel that his control over the light particles seemed to be enhanced by a force. That power did not come from within him, but from Jean. At first, Yu Feng still didn't understand, but he quickly figured it out, and it was obvious that the phoenix power residing in the body of the piano had a role. When photons are assimilated, the piano can use the power of the phoenix to also control the light particles. And it is not only control, but also can assist Yu Feng, enhance the power of light particles and the degree of control. I'm afraid Jean didn't feel this himself. Originally, the feelings of the two people only intuitively felt that their own power seemed to be enhanced, but they did not investigate the internal reasons in more detail, and thought that this was just an additional effect of photon assimilation. Yu Feng also realized this just now, but to really determine this, he had to carry out photon assimilation and conduct a deeper perception. Jean, come, give me your hand. Yu Kaide said. Good. Jean happily stretched out her little hand. Out, she will not be like this for others, but Yu Feng, although the two are only 7 or 8-year-old children, they are already like a couple, and this kind of holding hands is already normal. The moment he touched Qin's soft and boneless little hand, a flash of light appeared, and soon, in front of Yu Feng, Qin turned into the form of light particles. The light is not dazzling, but on the body surface of the piano, there is a layer of strange golden fluorescence flashing slightly. Seeing this, Yu Feng nodded. It seems that Qin has completely mastered the method of controlling the form of light particles. I have to say that the Qin is very smart, and the speed of learning is very fast. At this moment, when the Qin turned into the form of light particles, the body moved, and Yu Feng moved at the speed of light together with a very tacit understanding. Compared with the last time in a hurry, it is already easy at the moment. In the process of moving at the speed of light together, Yu Feng carefully sensed the strange phoenix power in the piano's body. Suddenly, his eyes moved, and a slight smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. That's true. Jean did not consciously control his power. Therefore, this power of control over microscopic particles is very weak, and it is impossible to perceive it without care. And it is this controlling force that attaches a pure hot energy to those light particles, so that the power of light particles is enhanced at this moment. At the same time, with the surge of light particles, it seems that more hot energy is absorbed from the body, and that energy is developed more bit by bit like a cocoon. Oh, sensing this, Yu Feng was slightly surprised. The hot energy absorbed by the light particles should be some free phoenix power, but it seems to be drawn from the undeveloped, deeper phoenix power in the body of the piano. Quote. In other words, assimilating the photons of the piano will help the Qin develop more of its own phoenix power. This wonderful, mutual feeding effect made Yu Feng's eyes light up. The power of the phoenix can invisibly strengthen the particles of light. And light particles, invisibly can make the power of the phoenix, which is as deep as mineral deposits, be developed more. It's amazing. Strictly speaking, the mysterious substance that Yu Feng absorbed for the first time, Qin's black phoenix personality, actually absorbed the power of the phoenix, and the same kind of energy seemed to be unable to make his data-based genes absorb one after another, resulting in continuous evolution. Originally, Yu Feng thought that the effect of the power of the phoenix on him should no longer exist, but at the moment, it was obvious that the power of the phoenix was still useful to him, but this use was reflected in other aspects. You, what are you looking at? Seeing Yu Feng silent, but his eyes shining, Qin couldn't help but have some doubts. Jean, sense your power carefully. Qin Xiao's face was puzzled. Just now she was immersed in the subtle comfort of photon assimilation, but she didn't pay much attention. But at this moment, being reminded by Yufeng like this, he immediately felt it. She opened her eyes wide, looked at Yufeng with a slightly incredulous look, and muttered. It's amazing. I can feel that my control over the power in my body is getting stronger and stronger. And that power seems to be increasing. Quote. Yufeng nodded. This is still preliminary. Jean, use your ability to manipulate your mind about the matter of onlookers, try to control the light particles with me. Good. Jean took a deep breath and took the initiative to use her abilities. Wow. Immediately, the light in front of the two people's eyes suddenly brightened, as if a fire was raging, and they saw the energy of the light particles around them skyrocketing, and it was faintly possible to hear the cry of a phoenix. At the same time, a light that bloomed like a scorching sun suddenly shone around. In Professor X's office in the school, several mutant children were sitting around Professor X, listening attentively to the lecture. Professor X sat in a wheelchair with a book in his hand, smiling and watching the children talk, but at this moment, his words froze, the smile on his face disappeared, and his brows furrowed. There was a pause. Follow and close the book. Okay, today's class is here. The question I just said will be your homework tomorrow, and I hope to prepare carefully, give me an answer, and start class now. When the children heard this, they were all stunned. However, they were very happy to be able to leave class early, and immediately close the books one by one and discuss the content of the class just now. Watching the children leave, Professor X took a deep breath and looked in the direction leading to the school's internal base, his expression showing solemnity and doubt. Just now, what is that? At the same time, among the college bases, Hank was busy with something in a room full of core machines. But at this moment, a sudden alarm sounded, startling Hank. What's the situation? Quote. Hank frowned, a puzzled look. Such a dense siren sound, could it be that a large number of enemies suddenly invaded? Look up at the row of surveillance screens in the room. At this look, Hank was suddenly a little dumbfounded, because the content in that row of surveillance screens was the same. All of them are a dazzling light. Hank's face was incredulous. This kind of strong energy light is not something in the base that can emit at all, unless it is violin. Could it be that the power of the piano suddenly exploded? Oops. Hank's face showed anxiety, and he quickly ran out. If this is really an out-of-control explosion of Chin's power, maybe the entire base will explode, causing the entire school to fly and annihilate in an instant. Roar. In a hurry, Hank suddenly appeared all over his blue fur, turned into a beast in a blink of an eye, and rushed out of the room. Soon came to the light source, where it was. And at this moment, Professor X in a wheelchair also hurriedly came over, glanced at Hank, as if he knew what Hank was going to say, and said directly. Don't worry, it's not Chin's problem, let's open the door first. Good. Hearing that it was not Jean's question, Hank was finally 100 relieved, but the doubts in his heart became stronger. Since it's not a piano, what is the situation with this strange light? Moreover, why does this light actually shine through doors and walls? It's not scientific. Puzzled, Hank opened the door. According to the instrument, the location of the light source is inside. Wow, the metallic semi-automatics open. Professor X and Hank both put on the sunglasses they carried with them and looked inside. At this look, both of them couldn't help but gasp. I saw that the light in the entire room was like a burning fire, and the light was so strong that even the sunglasses could not block it, let alone see clearly what the light source was. But at this moment, the light seemed to flicker. Immediately after the two of them, they felt a refreshing in front of them, and they could actually see the scene clearly, and they saw that the light spread out like a pair of burning wings, suspended in midair. In the center, there are two figures. Feather. Jean. Professor X and Hank both widened their eyes and had shocked faces on their faces. At this moment, the surrounding light gradually converged, and soon everything returned to normal, and in an instant, Yufeng's small hand holding the piano appeared in front of Professor X and Hank. Professor. Mr. Hank. Professor X and Hank didn't know what to say for a while, looked at each other, and then looked at Hawakoto, who suddenly appeared in front of them, and the shock on their expressions did not recede. Yufeng was a little helpless in his heart at the moment. How did he know that Chin suddenly used the power of the phoenix too strongly, causing the light particles to become active sharply at that moment, directly blooming an extraordinary light? Directly attracted Professor X and Hank. Fortunately, he controlled it in time, otherwise it is estimated that the entire mutant school will be filled with light, and those who do not know the situation may think that there are some treasures in the school. But then again, combining Jean's phoenix power with his shining fruit ability, the sparks that emerged between the collision of the two were indeed extraordinary. The dazzling flash just now, if used well, can be developed into a special move that blinds. And if he adds a lot of phoenix power to the laser, can he make the laser evolve into a big move like brilliance? Or in other words, he can also use this to cast an enhanced version of the yellow ape's big move. A Chong Go Jade that contains a lot of phoenix power. Think of the countless densely packed light bullets enhanced by the power of the phoenix shooting in all directions, it should feel like a blast. Of course, for now, we have to explain the situation to Professor X and Hank. It's not a hassle to explain. Soon Professor X and Hank became clear. So that's the case, all this is because of your special ability to transform elements into the form of glitter particles, and can you use your abilities to help Jean control the power in her body? Quote. Professor X said thoughtfully. Saying that, Professor X's gaze towards Yufeng couldn't help but be a little different. This heterochromia is tinged with admiration, wonder. He paid attention to Yufeng before, to a greater extent, because Yufeng can bring a positive and optimistic influence to Qin, so that Qin is no longer so lonely and withdrawn, hoping that with Yufeng's help, Qin can truly integrate into the collective. However, at the moment, his focus on Yufeng has gradually shifted to Yufeng's ability. Not to mention anything else, just helping Jean control his power is incredible. Even Professor X was still thinking that the reason why Jean was no longer afraid of his own power and was able to control it now was probably because of Yufeng in the first place. Hank also became more interested in Yufeng's abilities for a while. As a top scientist, he was extremely curious about the special light particles produced by Yufeng's body, and if nothing else, the strange nature of that could penetrate doors and walls alone made him feel the urge to study at the moment. However, although the two of them were interested in Yufeng for a while, they did not disturb too much and did not ask too many questions, and when Yufeng finished explaining, they let Yufeng go back with the piano first. In this regard, Yufeng was slightly surprised, but also quickly understood. Professor X, this is trying to make him not think too much, right? After all, for a 7 or 8-year-old child, you suddenly have a sharp increase in interest in the other party, constantly ask questions, and want to ask the other party's ability to the bottom, which will always make the child a little scared. Professor X knows the art of education well and naturally would not do such a thing. This made Yufeng a little crying and laughing. As a traverser, Yufeng naturally would not be frightened by Professor X. Professor X and Hank couldn't know more clearly who they were. He can't wait to communicate his abilities with Professor X and Hank, and it is best to let Hank develop some special props for him to train his abilities. For example, similar to the kind of machine in the Flash, which can exercise speed and test how fast it really is. Another example is some special instruments that can control light particles. Another example is some high-tech means that can help him carry out actual combat training. The reason why Yu Kaide approached Hank at the beginning was that he planned to borrow Hank's hand to help him develop and train his shining fruit ability, and Professor X, as an experienced professor-level figure, would definitely be able to make some guiding suggestions on his ability. Behind closed doors, progress will always be limited. There are always some benefits to being able to communicate with Professor X and Hank, two characters who can be said to be palace-level mentors among mutants. And more importantly, these two are absolutely trusted by Yufeng. If in the Marvel world, these two he can't trust, then there is basically no one to believe. However, at the moment, Yufeng is not easy to say, so he can only leave with the Qin first, prepare to rest for a while, and wait for some time before conducting photon assimilation training with the Qin. Charles, what do you think? Seeing Yu Kaide and Jean leave, Hank turned to look at Professor X and suddenly said, although more and more ordinary people have begun to accept mutants, more people have begun to target mutants, although Trisk Industries has collapsed, and the Sentinel Robot Project government has been terminated, but the situation of our mutants is still not optimistic, and the two children, Yu and Qin, with their abilities, will be targeted by some people with intentions sooner or later. Quote. Professor X was somewhat silent. Since the events in Washington, mutants have been known to the world. But as more and more people know what makes mutants special, although many people accept them, there are also more people who see mutants as a threat, and even regard mutants as weapons. A Trisk industry has fallen, and thousands of mutants like Koresk industry will continue to rise. The more powerful the mutants, the easier it is to be targeted by these forces. Hank, I know what you're trying to say, but now schools need students, not warriors. Professor X's eyes were slightly fixed. Our job is to try our best to let those children learn to control and use their abilities, so that when they enter society, they can live like normal people, and they don't necessarily have to show their abilities. Quote. Hank sighed when he heard this. Charles, I know you throw hope for humanity, but do you really not prepare for the worst? Professor X did not reply, only suddenly took out a card from his body, half gold and half red, looking very luxurious and noble. In the center of this card, there is a skull pattern that looks like it is upside down, and some of the surrounding patterns are carefully looked like tentacles. This is the VIP card that Alex holds when he enters the underground mutant fighting arena. Huh, Hank looked over with some doubt, and subconsciously said, Charles. Hank, I see what you mean. Professor X suddenly said, the future is unpredictable, human ambitions never change. I have seen many terrible things in the future in the mind of Logan. Although the plan of the Sentinel robot was terminated by the government, we will face various other challenges in the future. I know what the establishment of the X-Men will do in the future. Quote. It's just that at this stage, I don't want the children to endure all this. They are just children, and all they need is to study well as a student and integrate into normal life. Quote. They don't need to be fighters now. It should be me who should become a fighter. Charles. Hank couldn't help but sigh again when he heard this. He understood Charles's thoughts. Charles had told him something about the future in Rogan's mind. Under the ravages of Sentinel robots, mutants perished, and the X-Men still could not escape the fate of death in the last survival. Perhaps those death scenes stimulated Charles, coupled with the dead companions in the First War, so that Charles always had a psychological shadow about the establishment of the X-Men, right? Charles, Hank muttered again, his eyes darkening slightly at the thought of his former companions who had died. Hank, give you a task. Suddenly, Professor X's voice sounded. Huh, what the? Quote. Hank looked up slightly in surprise. Train Hawa and Kodo well. From those two children, I can faintly see the shadows of me and Eric. Perhaps, if one day I really can't do it, they can help me do everything and do what I can't. Quote. Professor X had a reminiscent smile on his face. Oh. When Hank heard this, he was stunned at first, but quickly heard the key words. Training. This word is not used casually, it is the students who are taught, and the one who trains should be warrior. Thinking of this, Hank's eyes suddenly lit up. Charles, you. Okay, Hank, now I can carry everything for the kids, but as you said, in the future, you have to prepare for the worst, don't you? Professor X smiled, followed by rocking his wheelchair towards the exit of the base. If Yufeng was here at this moment, he would definitely be a little speechless when he heard what Professor X said just now. What do you mean seeing the shadow of you and Eric from me and Jean? Could it be that you admit that kind of relationship between yourself and Lao Wan? Ahem. At this moment, of course, Yu Kaide could not hear the conversation between Professor X and Hank, and he was doing photon assimilation training with Kodo. Yufeng found that in the state of photon assimilation, the phenomenon of mutual feeding between him and the phoenix power in the body of the piano would continue forever. In other words, his light particles will be nourished by the power of the phoenix all the time, constantly strengthening and re-intensifying. This kind of thing can be said to be beneficial and harmless. Of course, Yufeng must continue to do it. So in the following days, in the mutant school, the students could always see Jean and Yu running around holding their little hands, and almost never saw the two letting go. Playground walks, running, library reading, canteen eating, and so on and so forth. As long as you can see Yu and Chin, you can see the two holding small hands, looking sweet. This scene made many students speechless and a little envious. Even under the stimulation of this scene, many mutant children also began to fall in love, and 7 or 8-year-old little fart children, learning to feather and piano, brazenly held hands in school and fell in love. 1 or 2 pours well. This kind of early love of 7 or 8-year-old children is nothing in the eyes of the teachers. But too many children are running around holding hands in pairs, and they are all 7, 8 or 9-year-old little farts, and even affect the curriculum, which makes some teachers speechless. Immediately, they all crack down one by one. You and Chin are covered by Professor X and Hank. Of course, nothing will happen, and the mutant little fart children who have learned early love are instantly stunned, crying and shouting unfairness one by one, and even hate you and Kodo. Of course, Yu Feng directly ignored this. I'm afraid Professor X never dreamed that he originally wanted Jean to follow Yu Feng and become cheerful and integrate into the group. But where did he think that Yu Feng was not interested in communicating with other little fart children other than Chin? Chin not only did not make other friends, but also provoked a bunch of enemies for no reason. Fortunately, Jean didn't care about this. With her, everything is enough. Before you know it, a year has passed. The time changed from 1975, when Yu Feng had just crossed into this world, to 1976, which happened to be the first anniversary of Yu Feng's crossing of this Marvel world. Today is your birthday. What gift do you want? Hank remodeled a training room for Jean and Yu. This training room is located deep in the base, surrounded by a wraparound spherical metal wall like a brainwave machine room, and the walls are filled with special pulse energy that can distort light particles. This distorted pulse energy of light particles is specially used to train the control of light particles. At the same time, Yu Kaide can also move at the speed of light on it, and Hank has developed a special test instrument that can record the speed of Yu Feng's movement on this global wall to 0.0001 seconds. I have to say that Hank is indeed a Doraemon-like inventor, always magically inventing and making things that Feather Maple can use just right. For example, a bracelet that Yu Feng is wearing on his hand right now. This bracelet is called the Light Particle Control Bracelet, which can help Yu Feng control more photons more easily, and can also store photon energy in it. Once needed, all the stored photon energy is released, which is enough to cast a huge laser light like the Shining Girl's move. After completing a round of light speed movement training, with a flash of light, Yu Feng's figure appeared on a round platform in the center of the training room that connected to the exit of the room. Jean was standing there, smiling at him. And hearing Chin's words, Yu Feng couldn't help but be slightly stunned, and immediately reacted. Oh yes, today seems to be his first anniversary. The time and date of the crossing, June 22, 1975, this day, Yu Feng will not forget. Crossing is equivalent to being reborn. So when Jean once asked about his birthday, Yu Feng directly chose the day he traveled to this Marvel world as his birthday. However, in fact, Yu Feng didn't care too much at that time, just said it casually. But he didn't expect that Jean actually remembered this, and when he mentioned it just now, he couldn't help but be stunned. Jean, you want to give me a gift? Yu Feng quickly showed an interested look. His cheap birthday originally did not mean to have it, but looking at Chin's precious and important appearance, he suddenly had some ideas. Aha! Jean nodded her little head. Of course, you have to give gifts for your birthday, but I see that you don't lack anything, immersed in training every day, and the research tasks assigned by Mr. Hank, and I don't know what to give. Quote. Saying that, Chin couldn't help but show a helpless look. Although she likes Yu's serious look, but Yu is too serious, sometimes it makes her feel a little helpless. In case they get married and have children in the future, Yu is still engaged in research, then she will definitely knock Yu's head. Where could Yu Feng think that Chin, who was still 8 or 9 years old, had already thought about their future life of marriage and childbirth, and he also looked extremely serious. At this moment, he opened his mouth, looking at Chin's helpless and a little resentful look, and the corners of his mouth suddenly showed some bitter smiles. If you think about it, it seems that he really lacks nothing, immersed in training and research all day long, which is almost his whole life. If there is really a lack of it, or a lack of mysterious substance, if there is an infinity stone as a gift for him at this moment, Yu Feng will definitely smile and close his mouth. In addition to training his abilities every day and learning scientific knowledge from Hank for the past year, he has been investigating information about mysterious substances, and he does not even go outside to find people to actually fight. Something like the Infinity Stones, needless to say, definitely falls under the category of mysterious substances. Therefore, the focus of Yu Feng's investigation is also on the Infinity Stones. Through investigation, Yu Feng found that this Marvel world is indeed not only the existence of mutants, but also a superhero during World War II. Captain America. And since there is Captain America, in the coming time, there will definitely be Avengers. The story of Captain America is similar to that told in the movie. In the end, Captain America died in World War II and died along with the Nazi Hydra leader Red Skull. It's just that there is very little information about the existence of the cosmic cube, the space gem. If according to the plot of the movie, the space gem should have been fished out of the sea by Howard Stark for research and later hidden in S.H.I.E.L.D. However, it seems that S.H.I.E.L.D. was officially established in 1991, and its predecessor should be called, What's Going On? Quote. Yu Feng couldn't help but roll his eyes in his heart. It's only 1976 now, and the name S.H.I.E.L.D. has definitely not yet been established, and it should be the name of another organization, as if it is called something, SS or something, but Yu Feng recalled it for a long time, and he never remembered it. Moreover, even if he remembered, where did he go to this organization? However, the Stark Industries, which Howard Stark is in charge of, found a lot of information, and even found that the headquarters of Stark Industries is not too far from the mutant school, also in New York. At his speed, it won't take much time to get there. Maybe he could take some time to visit Stark Industries. Probe where Howard does his research. If you are lucky, maybe you can directly find the existence of the space gem, and then use the light particles to steal it directly through the wall. Hey, you, what are you thinking about? Quote. Just when Yu Feng was slightly out of his mind, Qin's dissatisfied voice sounded. Now she and Yu Feng are familiar with each other, but they don't have the shyness of a year ago, and they directly knocked Yu Feng's forehead with a big grin, and then glanced at Yu Feng, obviously angry. Yu Feng touched his forehead and couldn't help laughing. Looking at the cute appearance of Nocken's little grudge, he directly reached out and scraped the wrinkled little nose, and said with a smile, Okay, my fault, just now I was thinking about how to spend this birthday and let you give some gifts. Quote. Oh, who said they were going to give you a gift? Qin gave Yu Feng another white look. Yu Feng was helpless. When was this Nico rolling her eyes so short? Seeing Qin's appearance of, come and coax me, Yu Feng couldn't help but sigh. The little loli under the sky is really the same, they all like to coax people. Yu Feng was really crying and laughing. In desperation, she had to hug and coax the piano, and finally this Nizi smiled again. By the way, Jean, why don't you come and travel the world with me? As a gift from you. Quote. Suddenly, Yu Feng said. Qin Xiao's face was slightly stunned. Around the world. How to travel the world. Suddenly, as if remembering something, Qin looked at Yu Feng with wide eyes and said. Don't you want to use your light speed ability to travel around the world? Yu Feng smiled slightly. Not bad, exactly. Quote. In general, it is too easy to circle the Earth at the speed of light, which can circle the Earth almost 7.5 times in 1 second. However, traveling around the world is fundamentally different from circling the Earth. Traveling around is naturally part of the tour. Yu Feng actually had plans to travel around the world for a long time, and even had a plan to run around the Earth at the speed of light to train himself. It's just that at first he was not very familiar with the road conditions, and it would be embarrassing if he got lost, so he put it on hold until now. And now, this problem is easy to solve. Yu Feng learned a lot of positioning and navigation knowledge and technology with Hank in a year, and he was able to make some positioning and navigation devices himself, tinkering for a while, and soon a navigation device that looked like a smartphone in his previous life appeared in Yu Feng's hand. This thing Yu Feng actually wanted to make a smartphone on a whim, and he was already tinkering, but unfortunately, he has empty brains and insufficient technology, so he can only install GPS on it for the time being, turning it into a mobile navigation device. When he finishes traveling around the world and is familiar with the various map and road conditions in the world, then even the navigation device will not be needed. After all, with his memory ability, of course, he will not forget the road he has walked again. Traveling around the world is not running around the Earth. You have to have a purpose. Have you figured out where we are going first? Although he was stunned by Yu's whim, Jean's little face soon became excited. Traveling around the world is really romantic. The first stop. Yu Feng thought for a while. Let's go to the east first, my hometown Huasha. Let me take you to the scenery of 5,000 years of China, you will definitely like it. Quote. In fact, in addition to playing and relaxing at Dongfang Yufeng, I also want to find the mysterious Kunlun location. Kunlun, in the Marvel world, is a mysterious other dimensional space, only at a fixed time will appear in the world. The Defenders Alliance series of Iron Fist is about the origin of Kunlun, and there is a dragon, named Shou Lao. It is he who gave the power of Qi to the Iron Fist of all generations. Yu Feng was thinking, there must be a mysterious substance in Kunlun, maybe there is information about the mysterious substance on the body of that dragon, Shou Lao. In any case, it is always useful to investigate. Even if he couldn't find Kunlun this time, Kunlun had not yet appeared in the world, but at least he should be able to grasp some laws of Kunlun's appearance in the world. Okay. Jean nodded her little head gladly. She didn't care where she went anyway, as long as Yu was around, but after thinking about it, she suddenly paused. By the way, Yu, although we arrive at our destination quickly, it takes a lot of time to play after all. Would you like to go and say hello to Mr. Hank or Professor Charles? What if they come to us and we are not there? Quote. Don't worry, the professor and Mr. Hank are going to Washington these days, but they won't come to us. Yu Feng said with a smile. Hank had told him about this not long ago, saying that he was going to Washington with Professor X for 2 or 3 days to meet several important people, and Jean was in the library at the time and did not hear. So that's the case, Professor, he should be talking to those government officials about the rights and interests of mutants, right? Kododo. Well, yes, Yu Feng nodded. What Professor X did every day was not only to teach children, he also had to think about the rights and interests of mutants every day. To put it bluntly, it is to do a good job of public relations. Professor X is the diplomatic ambassador between mutants and the human government. He longs for mutants to live in peace with humans, and really wants to achieve peace with each other, but not just shouting slogans can do it, naturally requires a lot of practical actions. It is best to get the government to formulate relevant legal provisions in favor of mutants. Soon Yu Feng and Qin were all ready. Take a walk and go trip around the world. With the golden light flickering, the two disappeared in the school in a blink of an eye, and when they appeared in the next moment, they were already in the border of Washaw, Washington. At the door of an expensive hotel, an expensive champagne luxury car drove up, and as the car stopped, a very gentlemanly butler got out of the car, opened the co-pilot's door, and said politely in his very British voice, Professor, it has arrived. Quote. Okay, thank you, Jarvis. In the passenger seat, Professor X also showed a polite smile. At this time, Hank got out of the back door, picked up the wheelchair in the back box, and carried Professor X to the wheelchair. Yes, please. Jarvis stood on one side, and there was a brightly colored red carpet in front of the palace-like hotel, and there were special welcome ladies on both sides, all of whom were very temperamental. Seeing this scene, Hank couldn't help but be a little eye-opening, but at the same time he had some doubts in his heart, and looked at Jarvis on the side. Jarvis Butler, Mr. Stark wants to invite the professor to discuss things. You don't need to make such a big scene, right? And why was the address chosen in Washington, the headquarters of Stark Industries, not in New York? Quote. Jarvis smiled and said, Mr. Hank, Mr. Stark originally wanted to invite the professor and you to the Stark Industrial headquarters, but Mr. Stark considered that the professor was dedicated to the rights of mutants, so he introduced the professor to someone who might be able to speak. Quote. Oh, what people, Hank-Chi said. His name is Gideon Malik. Wow, is this the Great Wall? It's really spectacular. Qin stood on the Great Wall filled with a reckless breath, took a deep breath, opened his eyes wide, and looked very amazed. Yu Feng was also a little excited in his heart. Just as the so-called, not to the Great Wall is not a good man, looking at the Great Wall like a dragon entrenched in the present, he has a very novel feeling in his heart. In his previous life, he did not see the Great Wall. It's just that at that time, the Great Wall scenic area was basically overcrowded. Coupled with extremely hot weather, the feeling of enjoying the scenery is naturally easy to spoil. But at this moment it is different. In the 70s, it was not a scenic spot, and no one would come to disturb him and Jean. Standing on this Great Wall, overlooking the surrounding scenery, before you know it, a heroic aura gushes out of your heart, and your blood seems to boil. I didn't expect that I didn't appreciate the charm of the Great Wall in my previous life, but now I feel it in this Marvel world. Yu Feng sighed a little in his heart. And he remembers that before reversing the future, the final battle between the X-Men and the Sentinel robots was in Washa, near the Great Wall. Although the Sentinel robot program stopped after reversing the future, this Marvel world is not just mutants and Captain America and Stark Industries. I believe that in the future, there will be Hydra, S.H.I.E.L.D., Avengers, mages and other forces that will continue to be strong and surface. The world is going to be more and more dangerous. Wars for mutants, wars for Inhumans, wars for the Avengers, wars for mages. There are also those cosmic empires in the galaxy, Thanos, the celestial god group Igo, the demon god Dormammu. For those beings, Earth decades are just a snap of a finger. It seems that Yu Feng has grown up for a long time, but in fact, there will not be much time left for him. After touring the Great Wall, Yu Feng took the Qin to visit other classic buildings and scenic spots in China. Whether or not these scenic spots were open in the 70s, whether they were labeled as places of interest, they all went for a walk. Beijing Forbidden City, Hangzhou West Lake, Suzhou Garden, Anhui Wangshen, Guilin Landscape, Taiwan Sun Moon Lake, etc. There are many places that Yu Feng wanted to go to in his previous life. It's just that in his previous life, he was an ordinary office worker, where he had money and time to wander around. This life traveled to the Marvel world, but fulfilled his wish in his previous life. Of course, Yu Feng would not forget to investigate the matter about Kunlun. Kunlun is a different dimensional space-time that only appears on Earth once every decade. It's a pity that Yu Feng took the Qin to the Kunlun Mountains and the Himalayas for a circle, and did not find any valuable information. Instead, the two were choked by the heavy snow. In desperation, he could only leave, ready to find an opportunity to find traces of Kunlun in the future. After touring the entire territory of Washa country, Yu Feng took the piano to tourist resorts in other countries. Maldives, Phuket, Bali, Bangkok, Dubai, Ireland, Bhutan, Switzerland, Iceland, Mauritius, Hawaii. See the graceful figure of the Thames from the spire of the London Bridge. From the top of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, you can see the crowds rushing in waves. Learn in the serious and dreary British Museum, and then engage in pranks. Bored eating pasta on the Leaning Tower of Pisa, Italy. I have to say that Yu Feng and Qin are really capricious enough to travel around the world. One moment he was walking on London Bridge, and the next moment he was already running to the Eiffel Tower. This kind of thing can only be done by Yu Kaide with the ability to move at the speed of light. Even he used photons to control the bracelet, with a mirror to directly let the light shine to the location of navigation and positioning, and then directly teleported him and Jean to the destination at several times the speed of light, not to mention how efficient it was. The ability of 8 mirrors has basically been used by Yu Feng as an ultra-long distance directional lightspeed transmission method. Unknowingly, the two have been playing for 2 days. The next night, swish, with a flash of light, Yu Feng and Qin arrived at Berlin, the capital of Germany. The most iconic building in Berlin should be the Berlin Wall. How about we go over there? Qin Xiao's face leaned in front of Yu Feng. Looking at the location displayed on the navigation monitor as Berlin, Germany, I couldn't help but light up my eyes. Well, Yu Feng carefully looked at the address of the positioning, looked around, and found that this seemed to be a commercial street in Berlin. Although it is night, the neon lights are flashing, and it looks very lively. He answered the piano a little nonchalantly, looked around, and his eyes couldn't help but flicker slightly. The address that the witch gave him, where Caliban was, should be around here. Hey, you, what are you thinking? Qin Xiao's hand shook in front of Yu Feng, dissatisfied. But soon Qin's attention was attracted, her eyes lit up, her body moved, ran behind Yu Feng, and then stared at a huge and exaggerated poster on the wall, and sighed. Look, welcome to the Munich Circus at 7:30 tonight. It's a circus, and it seems to be quite interesting. Quote, Demon show. When Yu Feng heard this, he looked over. I saw that the poster was a dark blue throughout, and behind the exaggerated twisted words, there was a dark twisted figure with pointed ears and the iconic demon tail. Seeing this, Yu Feng couldn't help but move his gaze. Circus, and demons, could it be? In the eyes of ordinary people, this is just a circus gimmick to attract the audience, but in Yu Feng's eyes, the words circus and demon are enough to make him think of a person, a very characteristic member of the X-Men. Night Stalker. In Apocalypse, it seems that the Night Walker came from a circus, and at the moment, it seems that the circus should be the Munich Circus written on this poster. Night Stalker, I'm going to check it out. Quote. To say that you are not curious about the Night Stalker, a mutant who can teleport, is definitely false. Since the poster said that the circus performance was at 7:30 tonight, and it seemed that the time was almost up, Yu Feng decided to go to see this circus first. Jean naturally had no problem with this. As soon as she heard about the circus, and the devil, she was super excited. As for what kind of Berlin Wall is, it has long been forgotten to Cloud 9. Soon the two arrived at the address stated on the poster. I don't know if it's because of the devil gimmick, or this Munich circus is already famous. There are actually many people queuing up to buy tickets, and they are blocked at the door for a while, bustling or not. Yu Feng and Qin naturally ignored this team. With a bang, it went straight through the wall into the arena where the circus performed. The whole stadium is not big, it is not small, and the number of people it can accommodate seems to be similar to an underground mutant fighting arena. There were already some people seated in the audience, and Yu Feng took the piano to find a great place to sit down, and began to wait. Soon, spectators continued to rush in. The originally empty circus venue immediately became overcrowded. The circus is not like the cinema of the future. The rules here are similar to the underground fighting arena. There are VIP seats, ordinary audience seats, and a standing area around the perimeter. In addition, this Munich circus seems to be very popular, so that the entire circus performance venue is crowded for a while. Especially where the standing area is located, it is even more crowded, and there are even people who are noisy because of bumps. Of course, the position where Hawa Kodo sits is absolutely refreshing. This is a great vantage point, undoubtedly VIP seats, not only not crowded, but also the best view of the stage, and even the circus with makeup. An extraordinary woman who sways her posture to offer you drinks and snacks. But that demon, the woman couldn't help but be stunned when she saw Yu Feng and Qin. How can there be two children in the VIP table? Although there is something strange in the heart, it should be a child brought by some rich man. Think, that demon. The woman shows a seeming hook. The human soul smiled, bowed down and rushed to the feather. Little brother, take your sister to see the circus. What about the elders in your family? Quote. Saying that, he also winked at Yu. Yu Feng was slightly stunned, especially when he saw this demon. When the woman lowered her body, it seemed to be a pair of snow-white big meat that seemed to jump out. The whole person couldn't help but swallow with a spit. I wipe, this, what a strong visual impact. I have to say that this foreign woman's murder weapon is indeed big, especially this demon in front of him. The woman seemed to be eating this bowl of rice, and Yu Feng even wondered if it would suffocate people if they were stuck on that thing. Well, Yu Feng calmed down slightly, and was about to say something, but then the sound of the piano suddenly sounded. Put your stuff down and you're good to go. Qin's words were cold, obviously very unhappy, and even glared at Yu Feng as he spoke. He followed a hostile look to the demon. The woman, when her gaze swept over the other party's pair of murder weapons, she also snorted with arrogant disdain. Seeing this, Yu Feng immediately cried and laughed. This little Nizi was actually jealous. That demon. The woman was slightly stunned when she heard this, looked at the Qin, and then looked at the feather, as if she understood something, and suddenly laughed. With its makeup, this smile can be described as an evil charm. People. Cluck, little sister, I'm sorry, it turns out that this handsome little brother is your little boyfriend. I have to say that your little boyfriend is very temperamental. Quote. Have a nice show. Saying that, he put down the drinks and snacks, and gave Yu a flying kiss. When Jean saw this woman's flying kiss, her eyes immediately widened, her little face bulged. She was unhappy, very unhappy. This woman is so abominable. Actually ticked in front of her. Take the feather. But soon Jean calmed down and she glanced at the demon. The woman glanced at it. The corners of her mouth revealed a small devil-like arc, and there seemed to be a strange flash of light in her eyes. That demon. The woman was suddenly stunned. She blinked in confusion, looked at Yu, looked at the piano, then at the circus stage and the audience around her, and muttered. Who am I? Where am I? What am I going to do? Quote, muttered as he walked away. Seeing this, Yufeng was stunned at first. But it soon became clear why. He looked at Chin with some tears and laughter. This Nizi was really big enough vinegar, and actually directly deleted other people's memories with telepathy. Hey, where are you two little devils? How do you sit in the seat of our young Master Weiss? Quote. At this moment, a brutal voice suddenly sounded, and I saw a white man with the appearance of a personal bodyguard and a fleshy face looking at them viciously, and on the side of him, a young man with bad eyes. Huh, Jean glanced at the two coldly. The next moment, who am I? Where am I? What am I going to do? Quote, the bodyguard and the young man named Master Wesses suddenly became confused for a while, looked around, looked like he had lost his soul, and then walked towards the Walking Dead outside the venue. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.